welcome to season 2 of Wealth, the podcast with me, Joanne, your anxiety influencer and your host. In this season, we're going to dive deeper into what wealth really means, looking at how, as a recovering anxious woman, I get through day to day, week to week, and I'm going to be sharing the tools, the magic, and the things that I do daily to help me get through. I would also love to hear more from you in this season. You can reach out to me on my socials, on my email. You can send me an email explaining your anxiety issues, whether you're recovering or going through some things right now. And if it resonates with you, I would love to have you on the show so we can share our stories, because we're all together in this. Now let's get on with today's episode. So it's episode 4, and at the end of this episode, for my YouTube viewers and for podcasts, you'll be able to listen to it. I've just pulled the card for this week, and I just did it just normal, did my little shuffle, made sure all the cards split, pulled the card, and it's on camera that it pulled out the card that links in again, but perfectly today. So I'm going to read the card out, and then I'm going to tell you what the podcast, honestly, your mind will be blown. And then watch until the end, and I will show you, because I actually said, you can't make this shit up. And I checked that everything was recording. So I've got the evidence there that it just pulled a card that's very, very relevant. I love it when this happens. It makes me really excited. So let's get in. So different cards this week. Not a Rebecca Campbell set. This is my messages from your animal spirit guides oracle cards. And the animal that we pulled is an octopus. The small information is practice shape shifting by altering your physical appearance and mannerisms. To become adept at shape-shifting, it's necessary to remain flexible and resilient and be willing to practice different identities by altering your way of dressing, your hairstyle, your demeanor, and your mannerisms. Particularly focus on your body language and voice qualities. Experiment by first making small changes in any of these aspects and watch what happens. You can also become skilled in modifying your aura, the energy field around you, by intentionally contracting and expanding it. When you practice these things, sometimes even your friends won't recognize you. You can even get so good at camouflage that you become invisible to others. Everyone has numerous personas through which they operate, and you are no different. It's a matter of being conscious of those personas and modifying them through the art of shape-shifting, just like actors do. Study other people and notice their mannerisms, clothing, style, and how they walk and carry themselves. Observe animals and their behaviors and try to mimic them. Developing this ability can help you more readily adapt to the various situations you encounter, thus enabling you to deal with them more effectively. Let yourself be an actor in your everyday life and have fun with it. Just remember who you are at the core. Sorry, Ted's trying to get my attention. He's on the bed and I think he wants to come down. So the reason why I got a little bit excited then about the card, the octopus card, because it mentions shape-shifting, it mentions appearance, camouflage. Sometimes you can become invisible to people. Become adept at shape-shifting, remain flexible and resilient. Practice different identities by altering your way of dressing, your hairstyle. So the podcast I've planned is a podcast where I'm going to open up and share and dive deep into the pressures that women have on themselves every single day in regards to their appearance, aging, fashion, makeup, hair, the way that we're meant to look, fitness, all of the above. And I want to dive deep into how that can change for us, and it does change as we age. I think we may put more pressure on ourselves as we age. Obviously, I'm talking to the millennials here. I can't speak on behalf of Gen Z. I don't know if any Gen Z listen to the podcast, but definitely anyone under the age of 25. When does Gen Z start? Yeah, 25. So anyone under the age of 25 may think differently or have different pressures. But I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go back 100 years. Now, I know no one listening to this is that old, but it's really interesting to compare and contrast the expectations and how societal expectations have changed for women. So the expectations our grandmothers, our mothers face, that we face, and if you have daughters, that your daughters are possibly going to face. And comment if you are an exception to this rule that I'm just putting out there. I don't think I've ever met a woman that's never felt the pressure, has the pressure, been through the pressure, overcome the pressure. I think every single woman that I've spoken to, friends, colleagues, clients, this comes up in conversation or something is mentioned, that we've been handed this script for generations and it's still there. This is how you need to look. This is how you need to act. This is what's expected from you. And again, if you are that woman, please reach out to me, because we'll come on this podcast and we'll do a podcast and you can give the advice as well of how to navigate this, because I'm yet to have met a woman that doesn't feel this pressure. So it's going to be a bit of a history lesson today, but I've really enjoyed researching. I do love fashion anyway, and I think I'm a little bit nostalgic for the past, and I've realized that lately, that again, maybe this comes as you get older and you start missing things, or the change in technology that we have, and we're so, obviously everything's online and there's a lack of human connection. And I've felt for myself lately, I've become very nostalgic for the past, and I've just watched an Instagram reel actually, and it was Rockports. I don't know if you remember Rockport shoes, and the cool boys at school had Rockports, and you either had Rockports or Kickers. I actually had Kickers, but my very first boyfriend, he had Rockports, and I thought that was so cool. And the advert was just following someone getting the Rockports from the catalogue, £9 a week, putting the CD on. There was just little things, and I was like, but the comments also seemed to me that other people are also feeling nostalgic at the moment. Like, I'm wondering if this is a thing. Is it something that we pine for the times that we've lost? Anyway, that could be a different podcast. Maybe I can research that. But today is all about self-esteem, body image, pressures on women, and how to overcome those pressures. And I do think that these all amalgamate under the umbrella of anxiety for women, because we're told so many different things and we have all these different expectations, and we're kind of fed, and I've spoken about this before in very old podcast episodes, with the witch wound and comparison and judgment against other women. Get a cup of tea, get your coffee. What have I got? I've actually got my magnesium and calcium orange today, so grab that if you've got one of them, and let's take a journey back in time. I'm going to go back to the 1920s, so we're going to do 100 years. For each of these, if you're listening to the podcast, I am going to put a little picture, so if you are intrigued, head to YouTube. You can skim through, get to this part, so you can have a look at the pictures of the women in each decade. So starting with the 1920s, the flapper era. Now, if you think of the flapper era, you might automatically picture the women, the little dresses, the smoky eye, the short hair. Now, these things were very much an act of rebellion in the 1920s. So the hemlines got shorter. Women's hair also got shorter because, again, and I still think this is around today, that women, I don't have long hair. And again, is that a little bit of an act of rebellion for me, or is that just because I've got thin hair? But I do still think that long hair is still very much, it's the feminine, it's beautiful, and you're seen as a little bit edgy if you've got shorter hair. There's one thing I have noticed, actually, just going off on a tangent, with Pamela Anderson the other day. I can't remember what the podcast was, and she spoke about her recent haircut, and I think it's amazing. She's got a little mini micro fringe and she's gone for the bob, but she said she got so much backlash from the haircut, and she was just like, it's just a haircut. I'm allowed to cut my hair, because what she's associated with is, the big beach blonde hair from the 90s. Anyway, I digress there. So we've got the flapper era. Hemlines rose, hair got shorter. The expectation for a woman's body in the 1920s was slim, flat-chested, small. Everything had to be small, very boyish. And you also still had to be deemed as beautiful. So when you look at pictures from the 1920s that, they've got the makeup, they've got the hair done, and yes, there's a rebellion compared to previous decades of, showing the leg, hemlines rising, a little bit more makeup than they did before, chopping off all of their hair, all of those things seen as anti-feminine, but at the same time very much keeping in with you still need to look feminine. So then we've got the 30s and 40s. I'm going to group these together as this is the war era. So we had the flapper era, fun, flirty, short hair, women were going out, Charleston, it was that era, bold makeup, bright red lip, dark smoky eye, slim figure. Then we hit the war era, and it changed from celebrating women being these small, dainty creatures with a flat chest and, small body, everything slim, to actually celebrating women for being strong. Obviously, the men were out at war, and the women at home were expected to hold the fort. They took to the factories. They started to have these jobs that were seen as men's jobs, but now women were doing them because the men weren't there. The women were holding down the fort, working in the factories. So in regards to fashion, trousers. Women before the war era didn't really wear trousers. It was seen as a big no-no. You probably wouldn't have seen many women in trousers even during the 1920s. Definitely not before that. So it was kind of allowed, in inverted commas there, that women could now put on the trousers, that women could wear the trousers because the men weren't there. And they needed this. It was for practical reasons. Like I've said, they're in the factories, working the machinery, holding down the fort in the country. Skirts became narrower. And of course, because it was during the war, the cloth became thicker, and it was more about how long can we make this last rather than how good does this look. What was introduced during the 30s and 40s was shoulder pads. And again, that was kind of highlighting, or not highlighting, what's the word? That was celebrating more of a strong silhouette compared to the decade before. Hair went up because women were working on machines. We had what they were called the victory rolls to keep the hair tidy and out of place. But it was also expected that women would still wear makeup, and a strong lip was still very popular. And it was said to wear the lip to keep up morale, to keep spirits high. So when the soldiers did come home, they would have this beautiful woman with a bright red lip to go home to. And everything here was about for when the men came home. So yes, a stronger, more athletic figure became acceptable compared to the flapper era, but this was again to be in line in a feminine way. So still expected to wear, yes, they wore trousers because they were working, but still expected to be feminine while they were doing this. So the red lip, the perfect hair. Think about those posters, with the one where there's the woman rolling a sleeve up and she's, what does it say? Did I write this down? No, I didn't write this down. But you will know she's got a red top on, she's got a little thing, scarf in her hair, and she's got her sleeves rolled up, and she's, women, we can do this sort of thing. And that was celebrated as well. So women being strong. And this was also the era for the curvier pin-up as well. So when you see pictures of women from this time, that yes, they do have those curves, but again, it's really accentuating their bottom. Think Marilyn Monroe as well. So she was just past this era, but this was when this all started to come in. And the thing with this era as well, the war era, is the women did hold down the fort. Of course, millions and millions of men lost their lives. But once the war was over, it was very much expected of women then to take off the trousers and put their apron back on and go back to working in the home. So it was a very difficult time for women psychologically, as they had also taken part in the war effort in a very different way, but also a very important way. And it was then kind of, right, the men are back, so off you go back to the kitchen and make sandwiches. So then we go to the 1950s. So I know I've just mentioned Marilyn Monroe, but I think if you picture Marilyn, this is a nice summary of what the expectation was in the 1950s. So, house goddess, goddess of the home, look amazing, clean the house, feed the children, don't go to work, but you still need to have this very feminine figure, look amazing for when your husband gets home, perfectly set hair, the apron. So it's gone from working in the factories and wearing trousers and the shoulder pads and that very strong look to not quite back to the very boyish and girly 1920s, more of a little bit in the middle of strong curves but feminine at the same time. This is where post-war, the beauty industry, I didn't really see much of the beauty industry when I was doing my research, but the beauty, grooming, makeup, hair, face masks, all of those things started to drip in. Of course, they existed before. During the war, you would have women who would use their eyeliner to draw the what do you call it? Oh, I've forgotten the word. There's a line that goes up the back of your tights. So in those days, that's where the tights joined together. Not like we have tights now. You can buy these tights now, more of a fashion thing. But the hem, is it the hemline? Anyway, they would use their eyeliner to draw the hemline on the back of their legs, so it looked like they were wearing these expensive tights because no one could afford it in the war. And they would be inventive over the makeup that they would use, but everything was rationed. Everything had to last them a while. So, spending money on makeup and face masks and all of those things that are not a necessity kind of took a back seat. So then in the 50s, the beauty industry really took hold. And this is where we would see that, the makeup, the hair, but everything was for your man. Everything was to make sure that you were this perfect vision of housewife, beauty, model, mother, all of the things wrapped into one. So the 60s leading into the 70s, think Twiggy. I'll put a picture of Twiggy. I actually have a couple of Twiggy books down here because I love this era. But again, the 60s steals ideas from the 20s. So it's going back to that very small and possibly slim figure. No boobs, no bum. So you've come out with the 50s where you're expected to be curvy, and then you're now into the 60s where you're expecting now to be slim. Hemlines again got shorter. The 60s was when the pill was introduced. So we also had this liberation of freedom. Well, now we know that's very different, but freedom that women were able to take control of their own sex lives. And it was leading then into the hippie movement and the peace and love of the 70s. So think 60s vision Twiggy. And again, we've got that short hair, bold eyes, small facial features, very elf-like. And I just want you to pin the elf-like because that does come back. And again, we see this pattern emerging in waves where what was fashionable 30, 40 years ago then does come in, and we have this amalgamation of all the other things in between. The 60s also brought other pressures. So women were now more sexually liberated. They had the pill and it was all about freedom. But with those pressures, they were still expected to stay slim, look a certain way, have the perfect hair, have perfect makeup, have their hemline a certain way. These bold colours also came out, and it was the rise of feminism. Women do have this newfound power, but at the same time, I feel like when I've done the research here, it was more of, I'm going to dangle this carrot of power in front of women, but we still want you to look and act a certain way. There was still very much a gender gap in the outside world. I know today we're just focusing on the look and how this would have affected women, but this is where the trend of, maybe women going to work and leaving the home, but again, that was also seen as an act of rebellion there. And then this sense of rebellion with women went into the 70s. So hair became longer again because it was seen as an act of rebellion. Like, I'm not going to do that. The hippie movement. So not washing, not shaving. So I forgot to mention shaving actually. So shaving did also start in around the 1920s. The first razor did come from Gillette. So obviously we still have those now. Because of the rise of the hemline, the smooth leg look was sort of the trend. This then did continue. And then around the 70s, it didn't stop, of course, because we still do it now. And even now, it's seen as an act of rebellion not to do it. So in the 70s, when there was this rebellion against, everything from the 60s, and it was, peace and love and anti-government, hello, some of these things sound very familiar, the shaving, the hair got longer, women then started to wear trousers again, but think the bell bottoms, the big flares that I think came back around in the 2000s as well. I did have a big pair of flares, I can't remember what year it was. And then body image, not too fat, not too slim. So it wasn't as slim as the 60s, but it wasn't as curvy as the 50s. So again, we're somewhere in between again when we get to the 70s, that women are still expected to have a slim figure, but not too thin. You can't be thin, well, you need a little bit of curve, but not as curvy as Marilyn Monroe. So already, again, we're only now, 50 years? So I think my nan might have been born in maybe the 40s. So if I think from my nan being a little girl during the war, and then coming out of the war, get into the 50s with the short hemlines and then the trousers, and straight away just thinking of your grandmother and the expectations that your grandmother would have faced. And then we've got all the other decades to go until we get to modern day. We move from the 70s to the 80s. So most of you listening to this will be born in the 80s. I'm an 80s baby, and obviously we were kids, so we think of our mums here. But this is where women started to work out, and it was athletic, it was toned. Think your Jane Fondas, your spandex, your lycra, and the shoulder pads came back from the war era because women were going back into the office, and it was the superwoman, the career woman, that women could have it all. Hair got bigger, makeup got bolder, and even the change in music here as well. We went from the disco in the 70s to then this synth, I can't say it, synth. I was trying to say this, we were watching something the other day, there was robotic synths, and I kept saying it wrong. Synthesizers might be better for me to say. But then we have the synth music of the 80s. And if you imagine in your head now, so the disco and the night fever from the 1970s to the we are always dancing in the kitchen at parties from the 80s. Very different vibe musically. And this is where you can see a huge difference. If you imagine just a fancy dress party, come dressed from a decade, and we will know from just how people are dressed and the way that they look, so what decade they're from. And it's not as smooth. I think for men it's a little bit smoother, but I can't comment. But I don't think over every 10 years there's an expectation for men to be slim and then curvy and then slim, but not as slim as 20 years previous, but then slim again. But now you need to be athletic. So in the 1980s, it was all about being athletic, looking athletic, getting yourself to aerobics, step, all of the things. And in the 1980s, there was still the pressure for women to be mothers, go to work, look good. And our self-esteem then also took a hit, because self-esteem really then started to focus on how you looked. And it was very much keeping up with the Joneses. And we also started to see a change in technology, again, not necessarily linked to self-esteem, but that feeling of needing to have, and when you don't have, you're not as good as. This didn't really exist as much until around the 1980s. So the 60s and 70s, yes, of course that would have been around, especially for housewives, and there's always that element of competition. Going back to the witch wound, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, this element of competition is always there with women. But in the 80s, this really did start to peak, which then leads us into the 90s, so the era that I grew up. So this is where, again, most of you listening to this will probably remember being a little girl in the 90s and the expectations that we would see. So I'm going to ask you the question, because this question, we've lived through two different answers. So when we were growing up, if our mum asked us, does my bum look big in this? We would say no, because it wasn't a good thing to have your bum look big. However, when somebody asks you that now, if you ask your daughter, does my bum look big in this? You probably want your daughter to say yes. And we've grown through that. So the 90s, I just think Kate Moss. Everything Kate Moss. But again, we've got that elf figure. So not quite as skinny as Twiggy. Not quite as boyish as the 1920s. But still, we had that grungy look. It was actually labelled heroin chic. So not as tidy, not as feminine, but still feminine. You've still got the long hair there, but in a more rock and roll way. So it was expected for women in the 90s to be slim, to be cool, to be rock. And obviously in the UK, this was the Britpop era, and the ladette era started to arise in the 90s, where women were stepping into, going out and drinking, and it was a big party scene and a rave scene. Everything was a little bit more undone. So the expectations were not lower, but they were just different than, so compare a woman in the 90s, a little bit more scruffy looking, hair undone, not tied back, to the look of a woman in the 50s that would not have left the house with her hair just loose, just wash your hair and leave the house. That would not have happened in the 50s. However, in the 90s, that's the kind of look that we would have strived for. And for women in the 90s, the self-esteem, we were pulled both ways, because we were expected to look perfect, but don't try too hard. So you need to be beautiful, but you need to be cool about it. You need to look good, but not like you've actually tried. So it was this kind of push and pull of, okay, so I've still got these expectations to look beautiful, but I can't look like I've tried. So I can't look like I've, put makeup on and I look good in regards to like Marilyn Monroe and glam, but I can't just look like, I can't be scruffy. So there was this like middle ground there. And of course, in the 90s as well, we did have the Spice Girls. And I remember that Ginger Spice, was the curvy one. When you look back, she was not curvy, but she was seen as the bigger Spice Girl. How crazy. And if you can't picture, just Google, just have a look at Jerry compared to today's standards. And we were told then that Jerry was the curvy one. And I've seen interviews with Jerry Halliwell where she talks about that. And it's crazy. It is so crazy, because there was this expectation again to be slim, but also cool about it. Episode is bringing you a little bit more wealth. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment. This allows other people, other women who need to hear these stories, find me. And again, if you have a story to share, please reach out to me on my email, joannewealth@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me on my Instagram, joanne_wealth. I would love to have you on the show, or you can just type up and stay anonymous so we can share these stories with each other. Now let's get on with today's episode. So the 2000s. So this is where I think as a teenager, where my fashion probably started. Yes, I was alive in the 80s and 90s, but I didn't really care. Probably started looking in the 90s. I was very much a sporty Spice, just going back to the Spice Girls. So I was young enough to like the Spice Girls. So it was Adidas for me. I'd wear a lot of Adidas, and I had kickers for school, a leather jacket, flared trousers, but mostly, I was the Spice Girls era. So of course I knew Kate Moss, but because I was on the younger side, I was more Spice Girls than Kate Moss. Although I did like Kate Moss, especially getting into the 2000s, but that's my own story. But I was more Spice Girls. So the Adidas, and then going into the 2000s is when we had Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. The Spice Girls were still around, but I think I had grown out of the Spice Girls by then, and went into more, I can't remember. I think this is when I started to maybe follow Kate Moss a little bit more. But then with the Britney and Christina, we had the low-rise trousers, flat stomach, boobs were in fashion. So I had no boobs. So suddenly you were seeing women with boob jobs. And, you know, you'd have, I know Pamela Anderson was more 90s and Baywatch, but early 2000s, and this is where boobs and plastic surgery started to come in. So we'd gone from this waif, this Alfin look from Kate Moss to, oh, now you're meant to have boobs. So women started to have boob implants. And this was when, you know, the rise of everything that we see today. And I can remember not rushing home. I didn't rush home to watch it. It was, what was it called? There was a program, it was on Channel 4 late at night, and I would have to sneak it on because I wasn't allowed to watch it. It was after the watershed. It was probably at 10 o'clock at night. My mum was very strict and she'd come up and check that we didn't have the TV on. Eurotrash. It was called Eurotrash. And there was a woman on Eurotrash. And the next day we'd all go to school and be like, oh my God, did you see her? And she would have, let me just find out her name. So I've just Googled, so Lola Ferrari, there was also Melinda Messenger, who again, both of these blonde, bombshell, big boobs. So this, but I remember going to school and we would talk about Lola Ferrari. I'll pop a picture of Lola Ferrari on here. Let me just get one here so I can, yeah, her boobs are big. However, I remember going to school and we would talk about, you know, things that she was doing and the look of her. When you look at her now, she is not as shocking. She is not as shocking as, it's so weird to see, actually. Sorry, I should have Googled her while I was, but I didn't plan it. So she died in the year 2000. I think she died from too much plastic surgery. So she did have the world's biggest boobs then, but her face, and I remember thinking she had gigantic lips, but she actually doesn't compared to today's standards. So just live here on air as I'm recording, this is just popping into me, how crazy it is and the expectations on women. So sorry, I went off on a tangent then. I told you this was interesting. I really loved researching this. And this is when the paparazzi culture also came about. So it went from, Kate Moss was in the papers, the Spice Girls were in the papers, but during the 2000s, the early 2000s, mid 2000s, this is where the paparazzi were just really at it for women. And I remember the circle of shame in magazines where they would circle cellulite. If women were too fat, if women were too thin, if they'd put a little bit of weight on, there would be, like, you know, a woman would have had a baby and then gone to the beach and there'd be a picture of her and they'd be circling something on there. And it was the paparazzi's job in those days to go out and snap women looking their worst. You know, think Lindsay Lohan and Paris, and they'd just be going out partying. Now, who looks perfect when they've been out partying all night? But they would get the picture. And that obviously then filters down to us, young women, that, you know, oh, we don't want to look like that. So these pressures then started to mount. So pre-social media, it came from the paparazzi. And then there's no real going back from that. So we had to look perfect. We had to look put together. We had to have big boobs and a flat stomach. We had to be able to wear our Miss 60 jeans, you know, and not be falling out of them. Otherwise, we'd be circle of shame in the newspaper. Well, we wouldn't, but that's how it made us feel, that we had to look this certain way. And I remember being, how old would I have been? Maybe 2005, let's say. And going on holiday to Faliraki, it might have been a bit later, and having a little beer belly. Now, when I look back at the picture, I didn't have a beer belly, but I was so stressed about this beer belly that I had imagined on myself, and I'd worn an outfit that was below the belly button. Now, that's not, you know, I don't know how Christina Aguilera and Britney Spears actually wore those below their belly button, might be the shape, but I never had that flat tummy because I've got organs in there. But I remember being so paranoid about this little tiny beer belly that I thought I had. And again, that pressure would have come from society, from paparazzi, from these circle of shame. The 2000s and come into the 2010s, so more recent, and we had the rise of the Kardashian. So we've gone from, let's just go back over the 90s, the 2000s. So the 90s, Kate Moss, 2000s, flat tummy but boobs of Britney, Christina, into 2010, big boobs, small waist, and now the bum comes into it. So bum hasn't been but the bum hasn't been around since the 1950s. Now the bum is back. So we also need to look toned. So it's high-waisted to make the bum look bigger and the boobs look bigger. We've got social media now, so everything needs to be Instagram worthy. So it's not just throwing something together like in the 1990s. You've got to look put together. You've got to look what I wore today. What's that? OOTD? Outfit of the day? Outfit? Oh, I don't know. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. And this is also when being surgically enhanced became more normal. So it was normal, like it was normal before, but you maybe wouldn't tell somebody if you'd had a boob job, or people would have it done and it wouldn't be plastered all over. I can't remember the name of the lady. She was in Men Behaving Badly. And remember, she had her lips done and she was all over the papers because she had a trout pout. Like, how awful that they snapped her after the day that she'd had lip fillers. And then Leslie, I can't remember her name, but the trout pout. When I'm editing, I'll put a picture of her, so I'll put the front page, because that always sticks in my mind as well. And now, in fact, I remember watching a Towie episode, and these girls just had their lips done on Towie. Was it Towie? Anyway, they had the lips done, and they had what you could call a trout pout, without, not judging. I'm just saying the lips were very swollen, but it was normal. And that wouldn't have been a story, because it's like, yeah, so what? Everyone's got those lips now on Instagram. So in the 2010s, we've then got that we need to look like an Instagram filter. And I've read stories of girls that do take a picture of themselves with their Instagram or Snapchat filter to go and look like that. And we also, in the 2010s, started to have this rise of everyone looks very similar. So before the 2010s, I feel like there was a lot more individuality in women and how we looked and what we wanted to look like. And we did want to look different from each other. But now there's more, I want to look like her, and we can go to a plastic surgeon, fillers, Botox, whatever, with a picture and come out looking like that person. And it's crazy. It's mental. And again, just spanning over me growing up from a young girl in the 90s to an adult now, well, 2010, then it blows my mind. I'm lost for words, actually. I'm lost for words. Maybe I need to go back to my notes so I can pick my words back up. We'll come into the 2020. But now, to modern day, because of social media, we've got a mix of everything. So the 90s are back. We've got vintage. We've got athleisure. So in the 2000s, you wouldn't be seen dead walking around in what you would wear for yoga as your daytime outfit, but we do now. Lots of people, I see people in the mall, and they could be going to the gym, they could be going for a run, they're going shopping, and that's okay. But we never used to see that. But then we've also got the body shapes of we need to be fit, we need to be strong. I do feel like there is a decline in the expectation of some plastic surgery, but difficult because now we've got AI that we don't even know when we're looking at a real person online. So we're comparing ourselves to computer generated images, but then we still see it's very confusing now. And I think we're in this amalgamation of a bit of everything because we're kind of fed everything through social media. So if we go back 10, 15, 20 years, go back 100 years, back to the 1920s, you would only see what was in the shops or on the posters as you were walking around the street. So you only had access to that. Now we have TikTok, Instagram, YouTube that are constantly feeding us these shorts, and we see things from all over the world. We see women who are athletic. So, okay, now I need a six pack, so I'm going to go and do this. And, oh, she's doing this with her legs and I need to go and do that in the gym. Oh, but then now I'm going to flick to the next story, the next reel, and she is a baddie, whatever, an Instagram baddie, I'm just throwing that in there. An Instagram baddie, which to me just looks like an Instagram filter that, there's these girls that look like Instagram filters, and they're the Instagram baddies that don't even look like that in real life. So then we're comparing ourselves to that. And then we've got the Ozempic slim and Ozempic face, and are we meant to be that slim, or are we meant to be a bit curvy like the Instagram baddie, or are we still focused on The Kardashians, who are also slimming down and getting a little bit slimmer, and they've still got filler, but maybe they don't admit it as much anymore. And are we allowed wrinkles or are we not allowed wrinkles? And we're getting filler dissolved, but then we're also having it put in other places. Hair is whatever you want to do with your hair, depending on what the rest of your, what era are you in? Clean girl, wellness girl? Are you dyeing your hair? Are you cutting your hair? Are you growing your hair? Are you shaving? Like, oh God, it is a minefield. The noise is constant. And I feel like even though I've got all this planned out, written in front of me in my little notes, that it's stressing me out. Because then we've also got spiritual girl that I didn't even mention then. We've got the spiritual girl aesthetic that is a little bit of 70s, maybe, hippie. I think I need a drink. So, what can we do after all of that? First of all, thank you for coming back 100 years with me. I really enjoyed that. So what can we do? How do we take control of the narrative? Now, I can speak for myself in saying that it's impossible to change the way that everyone else thinks. It's impossible to change the internet. The only thing you can do is change your own perspective of yourself and stop being pulled in, or try to stop yourself being pulled in by all of those things that I've just said, like this Y2K movement where everything goes and anything goes, but you also need to be perfect at the same time in doing it. And you can't wear makeup, but you can wear makeup. Just going back to Pamela Anderson, because I listened to that podcast recently. She had that backlash, and I've also done another podcast, and I love that she decided not to go to the red carpet in wearing makeup because she said she just didn't feel comfortable. Now, for today's podcast, I have done nothing to myself. I've washed my hair, I've brushed my teeth, but I normally would put on a little bit of blusher, a little bit of concealer, but I haven't today in honor of this podcast, in honor of knowing that millions of people are going to watch this one day. Obviously people will also be listening, so it doesn't matter what I look like, but because people will be watching this, and I'll hold my hands up. Sometimes I edited my video and thought, oh my God, I look awful. I try not to use filters. I quit filters a few years ago because I thought to myself, if I'm working in wellness, I can't use filters. So if you see a filter, it's normally black and white, or it's a really obvious one. So I try not to use filters or the touch-ups. Like, I don't have Photoshop or anything like that, because how can I support women in feeling good about themselves if I'm not showing that I feel good about myself? Even if, though, I do have days where I'm like, oh my God, my eyes, I look so tired, and I see things pop up on Instagram. I'm like, oh, I need that laser on my face. Oh, I need my eyebrows lifted, and these things do come in. But then at the same time, I'm like, right, okay, let that go. Do I need it, or is that just because I've just seen it? So it's really about taking back that narrative. And I urge you to, if you wear makeup, and yes, I know some women, they say I wear makeup for me, I enjoy wearing makeup, but just see how it feels not to wear makeup. I stopped wearing daily makeup, I think during COVID. And then when I started to put it on, now I feel like a bit of a doll. Obviously, I don't need makeup when I'm a yoga teacher. I could put some on if I wanted to, but now I don't wear it. I forget, and I'm like, rub my eyes, and I end up with mascara all over my face. Anyway, so try it. Don't put it on. Have a day where you don't put it on. When I was listening to the podcast with Pamela Anderson, she said, like, no makeup Mondays, or go out for a meal with you and your friends and none of you wear makeup. Just show your faces, show your friends what you look like. Really just support each other. And again, with body image as well, we all have our own body shape. Like, I went through a phase, and I think I've spoken about this before on, I don't know which podcast it would have been, but going to the gym and doing 1,000,000 squats to try and get a bum, because it was in the bum when bums were really in fashion. But I'm never going to get one. Like, I'm a small size, when I look at my nan and I look at my mum, genetically, we don't have big bums or big boobs. So no matter how much I do in the gym, I'm probably not going to get there. Yes, I had a nice, it was pert, and, but it wasn't a Kardashian bum. But how ridiculous would I look with a Kardashian bum? And you see women walking around, and I don't know if this might just be where I live, that there are a lot of bum implants, and I just want to give them a hug and say, you don't need that. You're beautiful. You've got a beautiful face, and let's take out the bum implants. Let's just take the bum implants out. But if it makes you happy, who am I to comment? Because some people would say to me, I don't know, they don't like my hair, or you should put makeup on. Things that we all have, but instead we should really be holding each other up. I've gone off on another tangent there. So how do we rebel? Let me just go back to this. And it's not about looking in the mirror and loving what you see every single day, because that's difficult, and we change every single day. We've got hormones that change our bodies, and some days we will enjoy what we see more than others. The real act of rebellion is actually seeing that your self-worth is not based on the size of your boobs, the size of your bum, how good you are at doing makeup, whether you've got eye wrinkles, forehead wrinkles, eye bags, big lip, big cheeks, strong jawline, no saggy neck. I'm just going to reel through some of the things that think about: flat tummy, long legs. What else? No hairs on the legs, no hairy arms, no hair on your private parts. None of those things actually matter. Your self-worth is how much you love yourself regardless of all of those things. Your value beyond your appearance. It's knowing that you are kind, loyal, a good mother, a good wife, a good friend. You are intelligent. You do amazing things for charities. You look after your friends' children. You can keep people from, I was going to say keep secrets, but that sounded a little bit like you can keep secrets, but you can keep, you're loyal to your friends. They can tell you things, and you're not a gossip. That's what I'm trying to get a point across there, because that is a good trait. You're trustworthy, confident. These are all more important than the size of your lips. It's about learning to say no when you don't want to do something. It's about being there for other people when they need help. It's about speaking your truth when you need to speak your truth. All of these things are a lot more important than putting all of our value on the way that we look. Do I become more confident? And what surgeries do I need? It's more, how do I stop giving my power away to other people's expectation? So I would love to hear from you in the comments about our 100-year journey today. I know I got a bit excited at times, but that is this podcast. Just going back to, it's real, it's raw. This is my version of my podcast. I try not to compare and judge myself against others, because that is what I want to put out there for you guys who are listening. Anyway, please reach out to me. Let me know in the comments. I have a few emails from listeners ready to go for upcoming episodes. So if you have a question, if you have something you'd like me to share or talk about, drop me an email, and I'll speak to you soon. Oh, I can't make this shit up. Much for listening to today's episode. I just want to end by reminding you that wealth really isn't about having money in the bank. It's about feeling at home in your mind, your body, and your soul. And don't forget, if you do have your own story to share, you can email me, joannewealth@gmail.com. You can reach out to me on Instagram, joanne_wealth. I'd love to have you on the show, or just share your story with me, and I will share it to the other women that need to hear. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Every single one of those means the world to me. Before I forget, podcast goes live every single Friday on your favourite podcast streaming website and over on YouTube if you prefer to watch. And every Wednesday on YouTube you'll find my Wealth Live vlog, where I just share my day to day. So if you're nosy like me and you want to know how I navigate through life, that's where you want to be on Wednesday.